the end of 2023, and this past year, I've used 4 different backpacking tents. The Nemo Dragonfly, the To Summit Alto TR2, the Gossamer Gear The Two, and the Durston X-Mid. I have some really strong opinions about these tents, so I'm gonna tell you what I like about them. You can put a whole arm in there. This is so tall, as well as what I don't like about them. Oh God, what kind of shit. At the end of this video, I'm going to crown a winner of the best tent that I have used in 2023. Woo! This is my show, gosh darn. Let's get started with the Nemo Dragonfly. All right, so as far as storage goes in this tent, Nemo has included so many storage pockets. We actually have one small pocket on either side by the head of the tent. And this is a great spot to put like a phone or chapstick. And then we have pockets above the head of the tent up here, so you can put a headlamp up there and it creates a really nice warm glow of diffused light. And then at the back of the tent, we have this huge stuff pocket. So this I think is so amazing because it allows you to get your gear off the ground of the tent and up like stuffed in this big mesh pocket. You can put like an entire like human in here, like a baby. Aw, baby hammock. That's not safe, don't do that. Now, as if one massive pocket at the back of the tent wasn't enough, you also have a huge stuff pocket up top here.
If you have 2 babies, each one gets a pocket.
Each baby gets its own hammock pocket. This tent is also pretty tall. Like the interior height of it is actually pretty dang good. And it doesn't have vertical sidewalls, meaning like the sides kind of angle in just a little bit. So that interior height really helps it to feel super spacious in here without actually having the same like vertical sidewalls that you get in some of these other tents. If you were looking for a tent to go backpacking alone, then I definitely think that the Nemo Dragonfly 2-person tent is fantastic for 1 person. If you're backpacking with another person, yes, this is a 2-person tent, but it could feel a little bit snug. If you're using this tent with somebody else, you better like really like that person. Because you're gonna be like on top of each other, which might be the goal. So, hey. My belly showing. Yeah, if I wanted to put another person here, it would be like over here and then they would be there. But still, like as 1 person, this tent is plenty large. It's got tons of space for yourself, for all your stuff, and for activities. Hey. I am 5'5", so I'm definitely on the more average side of things. If you are a little bit taller, you might have your feet hitting the back or your head touching the top, but that's kind of common with tents. I'm gonna get out of here because the ground is cold on my butt. We are outside, we are. Great. The Nemo Dragonfly is a double-walled tent, meaning that you have a rain fly that attaches separately of the actual body of the tent. What's nice about having a double-walled tent is that you can actually set up this tent without the rain fly if you are backpacking on like a warm, sunny, beautiful day, or if there's a clear night sky and you want to look at the stars, you can actually remove this entire rain fly and just have a totally open tent. That is like a huge bonus to having double-walled tents, is just being able to remove the rain fly if you want. And so that's one thing that I do really love about the Nemo. Another really cool thing about the Nemo tent, Nemo has updated the way in which the fly attaches to this tent. So on the rain fly, you have this little clip, very similar to the same clip that's used to fold back the doors in the vestibule. And you just take that little clip and you hook it onto the connection point for the poles, and you can tighten it down. Nemo also provided this tent with some really, really nice stakes. So out of the bag, you get these like super durable, fantastic tent stakes. Look at this thing. Hefty, hefty. Super small, simple thing. There are obviously tents that come with really shitty stakes and you can just buy a better stake. But I love when something like out of the bag is just ready to go with high quality stuff. And Nemo has definitely done that with this tent, and really with all their tents. So the vestibules on this tent are actually enormous. That kind of helps it be a better like 2-person tent because you don't have as much interior space. You have tons of volume on the exterior with the vestibules. So on the back side here, I have staked out this vestibule with the 2 stakes that it requires. What's cool about this is that you can actually configure this vestibule in such a way that you can very easily like unhook it from this stake and roll it back partway. And then if that wasn't enough, you could unhook it from this stake and roll it back all the way. like that. So you really can just get like so much openness while keeping the fly on. And then if you do encounter weather or if you want to close it up at night, it's super easy to roll this back and then reattach the fly. Boop, boop. So on the tent door, we have this little toggle, and when you roll the tent door back, you have a toggle that just slips right into that hook. So it really effectively and really easily holds the tent door back without it being kind of fiddly and like trying to mess with toggles slipping through holes of, you know, fabric or whatever. And it's like a teeny tiny thing that makes a huge difference in this tent. This is the heaviest tent of the 4 tents that I'm talking about today. And it's also the second most expensive. But in my mind, that weight is worth it because of all of the features that you get. And that cost is also worth it because Nemo has a lifetime warranty on their gear. And I always know that when I buy something from Nemo, I'm buying something that's really well made, something like super high quality. Plus I do love the color. Man, just do a quick pan at the other 3 so people can understand why I'm talking about the color. All right, great. So that rounds out the Nemo Dragonfly 2-person tent. Let's move on to my next tent, which is the Gossamer Gear The Two. Hi, buddy. Hello. How are you? I love this tent. Let me just shake all the water off of it. Whoa. Little mole buddy. It's like traversing the frozen tundra. Okay, back to tents. So this is the Gossamer Gear The Two tent. Gossamer Gear actually names their tents based on how many people they house. So they have the 1, they have the 2. I don't think they have a 3. Hey. But this is the 2-person version of this tent. Of all of the tents I'm talking about today, the 2 is the one that I have used the most. I have used this backpacking tent on nearly every single backpacking trip that I've gone on since I got it. First off, this is a single-walled tent, and that is what makes it so light, but it also is potentially one of the downsides of the tent as well. And that's because if you have a lot of weather or like a lot of condensation, you can absolutely get drippage on the inside of the tent, which I'll show you when we go inside. One thing I love about this tent is just how easy it is to set up. All you really do is stake the rectangular floor of the tent, and then you put your trekking pole in on the side here, and then tension this guy line. And that's it. Super simple assembly. That being said, when I have the vestibule rolled back like this, if I'm not careful, this guy line just becomes like a total clothesline. So that is like kind of a downside of it, is it definitely has the potential to like take out your fellow campers.
Maybe that's what you intended. Maybe it's like a Home Alone trap.
It is. Yeah, this is like how you keep people from bothering you. You just like use really darkly colored string and like a non-reflective stake. You just take them down. Please don't do that. Right. So this is the interior of the Gossamer Gear tent. So you can see the peak height on this is so tall, and the floor space is just massive. Now, just because you have that massive floor space doesn't mean that this is super comfortable to sit up in unless you're right in the middle. If I'm sitting kind of closer to the back side or the front side of the tent, you can see that my head touches the wall of the tent. And the problem with that is that because this is a single walled tent, there is a high likelihood of having water and condensation form on the inside of this wall. So if I'm like touching it with my head, I could very easily get very damp. The other thing is like if my gear touches this, or if I have like a pack leaning up against it or something, yeah, you just run the risk of having water come into the tent because it is single walled. In this tent, we have 1 pocket on this side, very simple meshy pocket. And then we have the exact same thing on that side. And that's it. That's all you get. Now, if you want more pockets and storage space in this tent, you can actually buy this thing that stretches along the ridgeline of the tent. That's called the top shelf, I think. And it's this basically like mesh strip that Gossamer Gear makes that has a series of smaller pockets on it. So you essentially just like hang that up in this tent and then you have some additional storage. But just on its own, as is, this comes with only 2 pockets. I have not really found that to be a problem because the interior floor print of this tent is just so massive. There's no issue kind of storing stuff, but if you really like to have things off the ground or if you like to be able to organize stuff, that is kind of a downside. Another interesting thing about this tent that took some getting used to for me is the fact that the actual floor of the tent is not staked down. So you can stake it out, but you kind of don't need to. Gossamer Gear refers to this as a bathtub floor, basically meaning that this is just like kind of a scoopy floor down here, and then you're actually staking out the actual tent, like on the exterior side with the rainfly. Quick note of the not as easy to undo toggles in comparison to the Nemo. Sweet, all right. The shape of this tent is just a really basic triangle, and then the sides where it's staked out, you can see that this fly extends just a little bit beyond the bathtub floor, and that's where you stake it. And then you do also have an attachment point for a guy line in the middle of the wall. So you could actually attach another guy line here, and that'll help create a little bit more interior volume, one, and also a little bit better protection from rain. So I mentioned the tripping hazard of this guy line here, but when the vestibule is totally closed up, it's not really a problem. And I do really love the way the vestibule closes. So I want to show you that now. I can just zip this closed, and then right here, I have this buckle, and that connects to a buckle on the guy line. Ta-da! You end up with a really big vestibule when this is like buckled in, but you can still unzip and roll back one side of the fly. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. I think what is so cool about this is that you basically have a guy line that holds the tent upright, that like tensions it upright, but you still have the ability to configure the sides of the tent in such a way that you either have a fully closed vestibule, a partially closed vestibule, or something that's totally open for more airflow and visibility. This tent was actually a gift from Garage Grown Gear to me. And when I first got it, I was like, oh, 2-person ultralight tent, like that's cool. And I set it up and I was like, I could have like an entire like family of gophers over in this tent.
I feel like you could just say family of people.
Family of people, right, yeah, I guess so. I don't know, I feel like gophers, there's just a lot of them, right? It's huge, borderline too big. So like, let's be honest, one of the things that I love about it is how spacious it is, but also one of the downsides of it is just how big it is, because you need so much space to set it up. This weighs only 1.5 pounds, which means that I barely notice it when it's in my pack. Yet when I get to camp, I can set up this huge, spacious palace and just have like a rad spot to kind of hang out. I was kind of a newbie to the world of ultralight. For me, I was a little nervous about how easy it would be to set up, but it's actually super simple to set up. So if you're a first-time ultralight tent user, I would say that the Gossamer Gear makes it very, very simple to set up your tent. And even if you do mess it up and like a stake pulls out or something, it's very easy to fix. Now for the downsides. I've said this a couple times, but one of the biggest downsides of this tent is actually just how enormous it is. You need all of this space on the side for your guy line to go. And a lot of tent platforms or even like dispersed camping areas will not have enough room for me to put this tent in like flat ground and stake out both of these guy lines on the side. And I also don't love the single wall construction because there's just a high likelihood of getting dampness or condensation or rain inside the bathtub floor. But aside from that, I just really love this tent. I think it's so simple. I love the way that it sets up. And so far for me, it has held up really well in super rainy weather, super windy weather, really like hot temperatures. I've just found it to be pretty comfortable. Quick pause. I am a notoriously bad sleeper. I generally sleep really well at camp. When I'm at home, I have a really hard time falling asleep and most of all, staying asleep. That is until I discovered Dream Powder. Dream Powder is a nighttime hot chocolate that is made with high quality ingredients. Of all the nighttime sleep aids that I have tried, Dream is the only one that helps me fall asleep, stay asleep, and then wake up with no grogginess. And if you don't believe me, trust this. Out of a clinical study, 93% of participants said that Dream helped them sleep better and wake up feeling refreshed. That's science, baby. So if you, like me, have a really hard time sleeping, then make sure to check out Dream. Right now, you can get up to 40% off of Dream Powder, but this is a limited time offer, so make sure you take advantage of it while you can. To my fellow insomniacs out there, you have to try this stuff. All right, back to the video. Let's go ahead and move on to the To Summit Alto TR2. Hi, old friend, how are you? So this here is the To Summit Alto TR2 tent, and this is the tent that I have had the longest. I actually got this tent maybe like 2 years ago, and even though I haven't shown it in any videos this year, it's still gone out with me, and I still have like a lot of strong opinions about it. So the To Summit Alto TR2 is actually a semi-freestanding tent. What that means is that the pole structure goes to the two back corners of the tent, and then it just goes to the center line on the front of the tent. So you actually have to stake the two like front or top corners out to get the full interior volume of the tent. It means that if I were to undo this corner on the tent, it would just like all collapse inward. There's no pole holding this front corner of the tent in place. The only place that I have a pole is right here. So the tent does stay up with just the pole structure, which is why it's considered semi-freestanding, but in order to actually get the full like structure of the tent, you have to stake it out. So the interior of the To Summit Alto TR2 actually doesn't have any pockets, but there are pockets that come with this tent. And those are actually made by using the stuff sacks that come with the tent to like snap into the corners and create pockets. So here's how that works. This is the pocket for the tent body itself. And then if I fold back the top of it, there are these two little snaps, and those actually snap on the inside corner, like that. Little snaps. Ta-da! So the two pockets that are used for the rain fly and for the body of the tent, those just snap in the corners. And then the pole bag for the tent is actually made out of a light diffusing material. So when you put a headlamp into this pole bag, it creates like a tube of light. And this actually gets snapped in along the ridgeline, like that. There is actually one pocket on the interior of the tent that you don't have to attach with a stuff sack, and that is this one right here, and then one on this side too. In case you can't tell, this tent is considerably smaller than the Gossamer Gear two-person tent, and even than the Nemo Dragonfly two-person tent. I would not recommend that two people share this tent. All right, so here's me using it normally, right? Lots of room, like space. If I had to share this with someone, that's crazy. So this tent actually has a pretty cool system for connecting the rain fly to the body of the tent. You can see here, kind of like the Nemo, there are these little clips that just like slide on and very easily connect the fly to the body of the tent. And I like that a lot. A lot of the other features on this tent are pretty standard across the board. You have just simple toggles that roll back the doors of the vestibule. You have a couple of stays in the rain fly that help with venting and with wind passing through the tent. And yeah, it's like a pretty simple tent in a lot of other ways. In comparison to the other tents I'm talking about, the vestibule on this tent is actually quite tiny. Standard basic vestibule attached at the two corners. And then there's a stake here for staking it out. I unzip this. I mean, it's a pretty small vestibule. This is the space right here. Good enough if you're using the tent by yourself, but it is considered a two-person tent. Just keep that in mind. It's like it's considered a two-person tent, but this is me telling you that it should not be used by two people. You will be uncomfortable. This tent falls in a weird space where it's not light enough for it to be considered an ultralight tent, but it's also not heavily featured enough to justify the extra weight. Now, that being said, there is one thing about this tent that I think makes it outstanding, and that is the fact that the way in which it is structured, the way in which the ridgeline is set up, and that it stakes out, the vestibules make it really, really resistant to bad weather. It is an awesome tent if you are in like a lot of wind and rain. It just holds up super well. This is the most expensive tent that I'm talking about today. And so for it being the most expensive tent, I would kind of hope and expect it to be the most outstanding tent. But I just don't necessarily think that I would personally buy this tent again, having used other tents that I think fit me and my personal needs better. Sorry. If anybody wants to buy an Alto TR2, let me know. Just kidding. So that concludes the To Summit Alto TR2. Let's move on to the last tent in this video, which is the Durston X-Mid 2. So this here is the Durston X-Mid 2 tent. Durston is like the Taylor Swift of tents. Mosquito, this isn't your season, bro. And I've actually only had a chance to take it out on one trip. And the big question is really, is one use with the most hyped up tent on the internet enough for this to be my favorite tent? Let's dive into the features of the tent and I will answer that question later. There are really two things that make the Durston X-Mid super unique. One of them is the actual shape of this tent. This tent is a rectangular rain fly and then a parallelogram tent body. And the reasoning for that is that you only need 4 stakes to set up this tent because you're really just staking out the corners of that rectangular rain fly. So that's one thing that makes it really unique. There are not very many ultralight, non-freestanding tents that use only 4 stakes to set them up. The other thing that makes this tent super unique is actually the fact that it is designed to be a fly-first pitch. There are a lot of other tents out there where you can pitch the rain fly first and then you could set up the tent body on the inside if you wanted to, but none of those are made in the way that the Durston is, where it's actually intended to be set up with the rain fly going first, so you can get underneath the tent if you need to, and then attaching the body of the tent on the inside. Come on inside. The inside of this tent is actually shaped like a parallelogram. So rather than having a rectangular shape of the tent where you were to put 2 sleeping pads side by side like this tent actually has a parallelogram shape like that. So if you sleep 2 people, you're kind of sleeping like this. Does that make sense?
Nope.
If I lay down here with my head kind of close to the top of the tent, you can probably see that at my feet, I have a good amount of space for gear. And now if I'm just to shift over without moving up or down, you can now see that I have a bunch of room at my head and not room at my feet. I hope that kind of helps you visualize the parallelogram shape of this tent. If it doesn't, I'm gonna put a graphic right here and hopefully that helps. Now, one of the awesome things about the Durston is really just how much interior space you have. This tent feels super spacious on the inside, and you have a fairly tall peak height on this tent, and that high point is actually lined up with where the door is. So you end up sitting down inside a tent that has a ton of interior space, and you can very easily maneuver around. Hey. One thing I really like about this parallelogram shape is that if you are sharing this tent with another person, you can very easily sit your butt down in this tent and then just rotate yourself and lie down. It's cooler if you're in it and you know what I'm talking about. I promise you it's cool. The first time that I used this tent and I gave you all a quick review, I said that there were 2 pockets on the inside of the tent, but there are actually 4 pockets on the inside of the tent. You have the 2 pockets, one on this side, one on the other side, and then you have the 2 pockets up top, one up here and one up there. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4 pockets. My bad for not noticing those 2 the first time, and thank you to the people who called it out to me. They blend in very well with the mesh. There's a couple other small features about this that I have very mixed feelings on. One is that in order to roll back the door of the tent, you just tie a piece of elastic around it. A lot of me's is that right? Or did I do that wrong? It just seems kind of a weird way to tie back the tent, but yeah, there's no toggle there, you literally just tie it. That means 0 one-handed operation in terms of untying and rolling down your door or closing it up. You definitely have to have 2 hands to tie it back. But yeah, while I'm sitting here, I think you can probably kind of see this. If you take a look at the top of this pole, I don't know if you can see that up there, but this is actually how the tent attaches. There's actually a buckle right here. So I can unbuckle the tent, if you see now, it kind of falls down. And then to attach it to the fly, I just buckle this in. So. The Durston has really large exterior vestibules. On one side of the vestibule, there actually is no way to roll this back. This is just kind of this flap, and you can stake this out if you want, but I haven't bothered with that, so I just kind of fold it back. And then on the other vestibule side, we actually have a little magnetic closure. So this is actually a magnet that holds back the vestibule, and I think that's super cool. And when I undo that magnet and I zip this closed, you wind up with this really big vestibule. The things I like about the Durston are really how unique of a setup you get. I like the fact that you can configure it a lot of different ways, even though I haven't had a chance to try those ways. The things I don't like about it are that it is a bit complicated to set up and kind of hard to do on your first try. And this is a small thing, but I don't like the quality of the stakes. You'll have to get better ones. That is the Durston X-Mid 2, which brings us to the end of this video. And now it is time for me to let you know my favorite tent that I used in 2023. Are you ready to find out? Drum roll, please. Of the 4 tents that I used in 2023, my personal favorite backpacking tent is the Gossamer Gear The Two. I just totally fell in love with this tent this year. It is super, super spacious. It's incredibly lightweight. And I just feel like for something that is so easy to set up and so easy to carry, It really has everything that I want and nothing that I don't want. So for me personally, as someone who's like just starting to get into ultralight backpacking, the Gossamer Gear The Two does such an awesome job of creating a super lightweight tent that's very easy to set up and has a ton of interior space. So for me, that means that this is my favorite tent. It is the one that I reach for over and over again for all of my trips. But if you are looking for kind of one tent to rule them all, maybe your first ever backpacking tent, I actually wouldn't recommend that you get the Gossamer Gear The Two. I would instead recommend that you get the Nemo Dragonfly. And here's why. The Nemo Dragonfly is one of those tents that just has so many incredible features. It's very, very durable. It feels really stable. It feels cozy and homey. And I think that because of all of that, it's kind of worth the extra weight. Like, it's okay that it weighs more because when you're in the tent, you're like, yeah, I can see why this weighs more, and I'm happy about that decision. So if you are buying your first ever backpacking tent, I think it's better to go with something like the Nemo Dragonfly that has a wide range of features so that you can kind of figure out which of those features are ones that you know you have to have in your tents versus things where you're like, yeah, I could do without that. And that way you can make a decision in the future if you want to keep using a tent like the Nemo Dragonfly, or if you want to kind of move your way in the direction of ultralight tents like the Gossamer Gear The Two. So that concludes my review of all the tents that I used in 2023. These are all fantastic tents. So if you own any one of these, you've already chosen an awesome backpacking tent. My personal favorite tent was the Gossamer Gear The Two, but I do think that the best all-around tent is actually the Nemo Dragonfly. I am super excited to use the Durston more and really get more experience with that tent next year. And who knows, maybe then my opinion of that tent will change and I'll have a new favorite. If you had a favorite tent that you used in 2023, or if there's a tent you want me to test out in 2024, let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I hope you have a very happy new year. Bye. Okay, bye.